Do you feel like nothing makes sense? Maybe you're stuck in a situation that feels impossible to overcome. Listen to this. God has a perfect plan for your life. And no, He doesn't make mistakes. Every tear you cry, every closed door, every moment of uncertainty, all of it is designed for a purpose greater than you can imagine. Picture this. A child loses their favorite toy and cries, thinking it's the end. But what they don't know is that their father is preparing something much better. Today, God is saying to you, trust me, because everything happens for a reason. Now tell me, what if the pain you're feeling today is the seed of something extraordinary? Stay with me and discover His plan. Have you ever wondered why certain things happen in your life, both the good and the bad? Sometimes life feels like a giant puzzle with pieces scattered everywhere, and it's hard to see the full picture. But here's the truth. Every single thing you go through has a purpose. Yes, even the hard times. Imagine your life as a beautifully written book where every chapter, no matter how challenging, leads to something greater. You might not understand the reason now, but trust me, nothing is random in God's plan. Think about a storm. While it's raging, all you see are dark clouds, thunder, and chaos. But storms don't last forever, do they? Afterward, the sky clears, and sometimes there's even a rainbow. Your life is like that. The tough moments you face are like storms. They're part of a process that clears the path for something beautiful that's yet to come. When you understand this, it's easier to face challenges with hope, knowing they have a purpose beyond what you can see. Now let's make this even more personal. Take a moment to reflect on a time in your life when something didn't go as planned. Maybe it was a missed opportunity or a situation that caused you pain. At the time, it probably felt unfair or even pointless. But what if I told you that moment was setting the stage for something far greater? God often uses what we see as setbacks to prepare us for what's next. It's like planting seeds. When you plant a seed, you bury it in the soil where it's dark and it looks like nothing is happening. But over time, with water and sunlight, that seed grows into something amazing, a plant, a tree, or even a flower. Your struggles are like seeds. Right now, it might feel like you're buried in the dark, but God is working behind the scenes, nurturing and preparing you for growth. Some of you might be thinking, but why does it have to be so hard? Why does God let bad things happen at all? Great question. Think of it like going to the gym. When you lift weights, your muscles experience resistance. It's not easy, and sometimes it hurts. But that resistance is what makes you stronger. Similarly, God allows challenges in our lives because they shape us, build our character, and prepare us for the blessings ahead. Let me tell you a little story. There was once a man who lost his job. He felt hopeless, unsure of what to do next. Months passed, and he struggled. But during that time, he developed skills he didn't know he had, skills that led to starting his own business. Looking back, he realized that losing his job wasn't the end. It was a necessary step in God's plan to push him toward his true purpose. When you trust that everything has a purpose, it changes the way you see life. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you start asking, "What is this teaching me? How is this preparing me for what's next?" This mindset doesn't make the pain disappear, but it gives you hope, a powerful hope that reminds you that God is in control and nothing is wasted. So, the next time you face a storm or a tough moment, remember this: God is writing a story with your life, and every chapter, even the hardest ones, has a purpose. You might not see it now, but someday you'll look back and realize that the very thing you thought would break you was the thing that made you stronger. Let's take a moment to imagine this. You're walking through a dense forest, holding a small map in your hands. The map only shows a tiny portion of the path ahead, and the rest is hidden from view. You're unsure of what lies beyond each turn, but here's the thing: you have a guide. This guide not only knows the entire forest, but designed the path itself. That's what it's like trusting in God's plan. Proverbs 19:21 reminds us, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." Even when we think we have life all figured out, it's God's purpose that truly leads us. Think about how often we make plans. We map out our lives, setting goals, dreaming about the future, and imagining how things should unfold. But here's the reality. Our plans, no matter how well thought out, are limited. We can only see a small piece of the puzzle. God, on the other hand, sees the entire masterpiece. While we're focused on what's right in front of us, He's already worked out the details of what's to come. Isn't that comforting? To know that you don't have to have everything figured out because God does. But let's be honest, it's not always easy to let go of control. We often hold on to our plans so tightly, afraid that if we release them, everything will fall apart. It's like gripping a handful of sand. The harder you squeeze, the more it slips through your fingers. Trusting God requires opening your hand, loosening your grip and saying, "Lord, your way is better than mine." That takes courage, but it also brings freedom. When you trust Him, you stop relying on your limited understanding and start experiencing the peace that comes from surrender. Let me tell you about Sarah. She spent years planning her dream career, working tirelessly to climb the corporate ladder. Then, out of nowhere, her company downsized and she lost her job. Devastated, she questioned everything. But as weeks turned into months, she began exploring new opportunities and discovered a passion for teaching, something she had never considered before. Looking back, she realized that losing her job wasn't a setback. It was God redirecting her toward a purpose that brought her more fulfillment than she ever imagined. Sometimes, life throws us curveballs. We face detours, closed doors, and unexpected turns. It's in those moments that we're reminded of this powerful truth. God's purpose always prevails. His plans are unshakable. What might feel like a disruption is often His way of aligning our lives with His divine will. Think of a potter shaping clay. The clay doesn't know the end result, but the potter does. He molds, reshapes, and refines until the piece becomes exactly what it was meant to be. This brings us to a question. How do we trust God's plan when we can't see the full picture? The answer lies in Proverbs 3:5. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Trusting God isn't about knowing every step. It's about knowing that He holds the map. It's about walking forward, even when the road ahead is unclear, because you know He's guiding you every step of the way. Trusting God doesn't mean life will be free of challenges. It means believing that every obstacle, every twist, and every turn is part of a greater story. It means having faith that even when things don't make sense, God is working for your good. This kind of trust transforms how we view life. It shifts our perspective from fear to faith, from doubt to dependence on Him. So as you navigate life's uncertainties, remember this. You don't have to see the whole path to take the next step. You just need to trust the one who's leading you. His plans are perfect, and His purpose will always prevail. Have you ever tried putting together a jigsaw puzzle without the box? All you have are tiny pieces scattered in front of you, and without the full picture, it's almost impossible to see how they fit. That's what life feels like sometimes, fragmented and confusing. But here's the beauty. God has the full picture. While we're holding one piece, unsure of where it goes, He's already completed the masterpiece. God sees everything, the past, the present, and the future, all at once. This isn't just about knowing the future. It's about understanding that every detail of your life is interconnected. Imagine a tapestry being woven. From underneath, it looks messy, threads crisscrossing, knots everywhere. But from above, it's a stunning design. God's perspective is like that. What we see as chaos, He sees as creation. Every thread, every detail is part of a plan that only He can see clearly. Let's break this down. Have you ever experienced something painful or confusing and later realized it had a greater purpose? Maybe you lost a relationship only to discover that it made room for something better, or perhaps you faced a challenge that taught you resilience and strength. At the moment, it's hard to understand why things happen the way they do, but God doesn't just see the outcome. He knows how every experience prepares you for what's ahead. Think of Joseph in the Bible. His story is a powerful example of God's perspective. Joseph was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and later imprisoned for a crime he didn't commit. From his point of view, it must have seemed like his life was falling apart. But God saw the bigger picture. He used every trial to position Joseph as a leader in Egypt. where he would save countless lives during a famine. What seemed like a series of setbacks was actually God's way of setting Joseph up for something extraordinary. Here's a comforting truth: nothing surprises God. He's never caught off guard or taken by surprise. While we're trying to make sense of one moment, he's already worked out how it fits into the bigger story. This doesn't mean life will always be easy, but it does mean we can trust that nothing is wasted. Every experience, even the painful ones, serves a purpose in his grand design. You might be wondering, if God sees everything, why doesn't he just make life easier? It's a fair question, but think of it this way. If life were too easy, we'd miss out on the growth that comes from overcoming challenges. God's perspective isn't just about what's happening now, it's about who you're becoming. He uses every moment to shape you, refine you, and draw you closer to him. So what does this mean for us? It means that when life feels overwhelming, we can take comfort in knowing that God is in control. It means we don't have to understand every detail to trust that he's working for our good. It's like walking through a dark tunnel, knowing there's light at the end. You might not see it yet, but it's there, and God sees it, even when you can't. As you move forward, remember this: God's vision is perfect, and his timing is flawless. While we're navigating life with limited sight, he's already prepared the path ahead. Trust in his perspective, because he sees the full picture, and it's more beautiful than you can imagine. Have you ever taken a wrong turn while driving, only to have your GPS calmly say, "Recalculating route"? It's reassuring, isn't it? You're reminded that even though you've gone off course, there's still a way to reach your destination. That's exactly what it feels like when God redirects our paths. When life doesn't go as planned, it's not the end of the road. It's God recalculating our route towards something better. Life's detours can feel confusing, even frustrating. Imagine planning a picnic on a sunny day, only for a sudden downpour to ruin it. At first, all you see is disappointment, but what if that storm pushed you indoors, where you ended up meeting someone who changed your life forever? What felt like a disruption was actually a divine redirection. This is how God often works. What we see as obstacles, he sees as opportunities to realign us with his perfect plan. Think about how much effort we put into making plans. We chart our courses, set our goals, and dream big dreams. And while there's nothing wrong with planning, we must remember that our perspective is limited. It's like trying to navigate a mountain with a small map while God has the full GPS. He knows where the dead ends are, where the dangerous turns lie, and where the smoothest paths lead. Trusting him means being willing to let go of our map and follow his guidance instead. Let me share a story about David. Not the David from the Bible, but a friend who once thought his life was on the perfect track. He had the job he always wanted, a comfortable life, and clear goals. But one day, everything changed. He was laid off unexpectedly, and his plans unraveled. He felt lost. But as he began to pray and seek God's direction, doors he never imagined began to open. He found a calling he hadn't considered, a career that not only provided, but also gave him purpose. What he saw as the end of the road turned out to be the beginning of something extraordinary. When God redirects us, it can feel unsettling. Our natural reaction is to resist. We ask, "Why is this happening to me?" Or, "What did I do wrong?" But here's a truth to hold on to. God isn't punishing you, he's positioning you. Just as a shepherd gently redirects a wandering sheep back to the flock, God lovingly guides us back to where we need to be. It might not feel comfortable, but his detours are always for our good. Think of an artist painting a masterpiece. Sometimes the artist makes unexpected brushstrokes that don't make sense to the observer. But those strokes, when viewed in the context of the whole painting, add depth and beauty. That's how God works in our lives. Every redirection, every unexpected turn is part of his greater design. We might not see the full picture yet, but he does. It's important to remember that redirection isn't rejection. Just because a door closes doesn't mean God is denying you. It might simply mean he has something better in store. Closed doors protect us from paths that aren't meant for us and guide us toward the ones that are. It's not about losing opportunities, it's about stepping into the right ones. So, when life takes an unexpected turn, take a deep breath and remember this: God is recalculating your route. Trust that His directions are leading you to a destination far greater than anything you could have planned for yourself. Every detour is a step closer to His perfect will. Imagine holding onto a rope as tightly as you can. Your hands start to ache, your grip weakens, and the weight becomes unbearable. What if someone told you that letting go wouldn't cause you to fall, but would set you free? That's what surrendering control to God feels like. We often cling to our plans, our fears, and our need for control, thinking it's the only way to stay safe. But in reality, freedom comes when we release that rope into God's hands. Letting go isn't easy. We're wired to want control. It's comforting to think we can manage everything ourselves, like a child insisting they can tie their shoes without help. But sometimes our attempts at control only make things messier. Proverbs 3:5 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." It's a reminder that true peace comes not from controlling every outcome, but from trusting the one who holds the universe in His hands. Let me tell you about Anna. She was a perfectionist who planned every detail of her life. Her calendar was color-coded, her goals meticulously outlined. But when a family emergency derailed her plans, she was forced to stop and reevaluate. Through prayer and reflection, Anna realized that her need for control was rooted in fear. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown. As she began to release that fear to God, something remarkable happened. She found a peace she'd never experienced before, even though her circumstances hadn't changed. Holding on to control can feel like walking on a tightrope. One wrong move, and everything might collapse. But here's the truth: God never asked us to walk that tightrope alone. He's like a safety net beneath us, ready to catch us when we fall. When we let go of our need to control every detail, we make room for God's peace to flood our hearts. It's not about abandoning responsibility, but about trusting Him to lead us in ways we couldn't have planned ourselves. Control is often driven by fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of loss, fear of making mistakes. But God's love drives out fear. When we truly believe that He has our best interests at heart, we can let go with confidence. It's like being a passenger in a car, driven by someone you trust completely. You don't need to clutch the wheel because you know you're in good hands. Letting go doesn't mean giving up. It means giving in to God's perfect will. It's about saying, "Lord, I don't know the way, but I trust that you do." This shift in mindset transforms how we approach life. Instead of carrying the burden of figuring everything out, we lean on the one who already has the answers. Think of a sailboat. It doesn't move by clinging to the dock, but by releasing itself to the wind. The same is true for us. When we let go of our need for control, we allow God's Spirit to guide us, moving us forward in ways we never imagined. So as you face life's uncertainties, ask yourself, what am I holding on to that I need to release? Surrendering control isn't about losing. It's about gaining the freedom to live fully in God's grace. Let go and watch how God takes you to places you never dreamed possible. Have you ever paused to ask yourself, am I pursuing my dreams or God's dreams for me? It's a powerful question, one that demands humility to answer honestly. We all have desires and ambitions, things we're passionate about, goals we work hard to achieve, but sometimes, without even realizing it, those desires can be driven more by our ego than by a genuine longing to follow God's will. That's why humility is so important. It's what allows us to step back and say, "God, not my will, but yours." Humility doesn't come naturally. It's in our nature to want control and recognition. We like to feel accomplished, to see the fruits of our labor. But when we rely solely on our own understanding and strength, we limit what God can do in our lives. Think of it this way: trying to steer a car while someone else is driving is not only unnecessary, but dangerous. Humility means sitting back and trusting God to navigate. After all, He knows the road far better than we do. Consider the story of Peter in the Bible. Peter was bold and confident, qualities that served him well as a disciple of Jesus. But there was a moment when his confidence turned into arrogance. He told Jesus he would never deny him, even if everyone else did. Yet, when the time came, Peter denied Jesus 3 times. It was a humbling experience, but one that ultimately transformed Peter into a stronger, more faithful servant. That's the power of humility. It reshapes us into who we're meant to be. Humility isn't about thinking less of yourself. It's about thinking of yourself less. It's about acknowledging that while you have talents and strengths, those gifts come from God. When we place our dreams and plans at His feet, we're not giving up. We're inviting Him to refine them. It's like handing over a rough diamond to a master jeweler. What He returns to us is far more valuable and beautiful than anything we could have imagined. The world often celebrates self-made success, but as believers, we know that true success comes from aligning our lives with God's will. This doesn't mean abandoning ambition. It means seeking God's guidance in everything we do. It's about asking, Lord, is this your plan for me, or am I pursuing something for my own glory? That question, though difficult, keeps us grounded and connected to Him. Let me share an example. Maria was a talented musician with dreams of making it big. She spent years chasing record deals and performing at every opportunity, but nothing seemed to click. Frustrated, she finally prayed, God, if this isn't your plan for me, show me what is. Shortly after, she was invited to lead worship at her church. What began as a small act of service blossomed into a ministry that touched countless lives. Maria realized that her gift wasn't for fame, but for glorifying God. When we embrace humility, we open ourselves up to possibilities we never considered. It's like standing at a crossroads and choosing to let God direct our path, even if it's not the one we expected. Humility doesn't mean weakness, it means strength under control. God's control. It's about trusting that His dreams for us are far greater than our own. So, the next time you find yourself at a decision point, pause and reflect. Ask yourself, is this about me or is this about God? That moment of humility could be the key to unlocking a life filled with purpose and divine direction. Trust Him and let your steps be guided by His wisdom. Picture yourself reading a book for the first time. You're caught up in the suspense, not knowing how things will unfold. Now imagine the author sitting beside you, already knowing how the story ends. That's what it's like with God. While we're living life one moment at a time, He sees the beginning, the middle, and the end all at once. Isaiah 46:10 reminds us of this when God says, I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times, what is still to come. This truth is both humbling and comforting. Humbling because it reminds us of our limited perspective, and comforting because it means nothing takes God by surprise. While we worry about tomorrow, God is already there. He's not just watching from afar. He's actively working out His plan for us, weaving every detail into a masterpiece. Imagine a master builder crafting a skyscraper. The workers on the ground may only see the foundation and wonder how it will ever become a finished structure. But the builder has the blueprints. He knows exactly what the final result will look like. Similarly, God holds the blueprint of our lives. Even when all we see are the bricks being laid, He sees the completed design. This concept is challenging when life feels chaotic. When unexpected events disrupt our plans, it's easy to feel lost. But Isaiah 46:10 reassures us that God's purpose will always prevail. His sovereignty is unshakable. Think about that. No matter how uncertain things may seem, God's plan remains steady, unaffected by the storms of life. Let me share a story. Emily dreamed of becoming a doctor. She worked hard, studying for years, only to face rejection from every medical school she applied to. Devastated, she questioned her calling. But during that time, she began volunteering at a local shelter, where she discovered a passion for social work. Years later, she realized that while her plan didn't unfold as expected, God's plan led her to a career where she made a profound impact. Her rejection wasn't a detour, it was a redirection. Knowing that God declares the end from the beginning changes how we face life's uncertainties. It allows us to approach challenges with confidence, trusting that even when we don't understand, He is in control. It's like walking through a maze with someone who already knows the way out. You might feel disoriented, but they see the path clearly. But here's something even more incredible. Not only does God know the end, He's designed it for our good. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." That's the promise we hold on to when life feels unpredictable. So as you navigate the twists and turns of life, remember this: God is the author of your story. While you're turning the pages, unsure of what's next, He's already written the ending. And it's a good ending, one filled with hope, purpose, and His unshakable love. Have you ever stopped to think about the phrase, "all things work together for good"? At first glance, it's easy to agree when life is going well, when everything falls into place and blessings are evident. But what about the hard times, the moments when nothing makes sense and the pain feels unbearable? Romans 8:28 doesn't say that only the good things work for our benefit. It boldly declares, "In all things God works for the good of those who love Him." That means the triumphs, the setbacks, and even the seemingly meaningless struggles are part of a greater plan. It's comforting to know that nothing is wasted in God's hands. Every detail of your life, every joy, every sorrow, every unanswered question is carefully woven together by the master planner. Imagine a mosaic made up of broken pieces of glass. At first, the shards look like chaos, but when placed in the hands of an artist, those pieces come together to form a breathtaking work of art. Your life is like that mosaic. What feels like brokenness now is part of a masterpiece in progress. There's a key word in Romans 8:28 that often gets overlooked: works. It's an active process. God doesn't passively observe your life. He's actively involved in shaping your story. This doesn't mean life will always feel easy or comfortable. Sometimes the refining process is painful, but it's never pointless. Like gold being purified in fire, the heat may feel intense, but it's necessary to bring out the best in us. Let me tell you about Carlos, a man who faced what seemed like endless challenges. He lost his job, faced financial struggles, and dealt with family conflict all at once. At the time, he couldn't see any good in what was happening. But as months turned into years, he began to notice how each difficulty prepared him for a new chapter. The job loss taught him resilience. The financial struggles showed him how to depend on God. And the family conflicts, they deepened his relationships through forgiveness. Looking back, Carlos realized that every challenge played a role in shaping the person he became. It's natural to ask, why is this happening to me in the midst of hardship? But instead of focusing on the pain, consider asking, what is God teaching me through this? That shift in perspective doesn't erase the difficulty, but it helps you find purpose in the process. It's not about ignoring your feelings, but about anchoring your faith in the knowledge that God is working behind the scenes. Sometimes, the good that comes from a situation isn't immediately visible. It's like planting a seed. You water it, nurture it, and wait. For a while, nothing seems to happen. But beneath the soil, roots are growing, and one day that seed becomes a flourishing plant. Your struggles might feel like that waiting period, silent and slow, but trust that God is at work even when you can't see it. When we embrace this truth, it transforms how we view life's challenges. Instead of feeling defeated, we begin to see opportunities for growth and trust. Romans 8:28 reminds us that God's goodness isn't conditional or limited. It's not just present in the highlights of life, but in every single moment. It's a reminder that His plans are always better than ours, even when we don't understand them. So as you navigate life's twists and turns, hold on to this promise. No matter what you're facing, God is working it out for your good. It may not look like it now, but one day you'll see how every piece fits perfectly into His divine design. Imagine standing in front of a blazing furnace, watching a craftsman carefully place a piece of gold inside. The fire is intense, consuming everything impure, yet the craftsman never lets it burn too long. He knows exactly when to pull the gold out, at the precise moment when it's refined and shines the brightest. That's what trials feel like in our lives. They're not meant to destroy us, but to refine us, to strip away what doesn't belong and reveal the strength within. Job 23:10 says, "But he knows the way that I take. When he has tested me, I will come forth as gold." Trials are never easy, but they are necessary. They push us out of our comfort zones and into a deeper reliance on God. Without them, we might remain stagnant, comfortable in our routines, but far from reaching our full potential. Think of an athlete training for a marathon. The process involves pain, sweat, and exhaustion, but the end result is endurance and strength. Similarly, the challenges we face build our spiritual muscles, preparing us for what's ahead. You might wonder why God allows trials in the first place. After all, He's a loving father, right? But just as a parent allows their child to struggle with learning something new, like riding a bike or solving a difficult problem, God knows that growth often comes through struggle. He doesn't remove the challenges, but walks with us through them, offering his strength and guidance. Take the story of Joseph in the Bible. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, and unjustly imprisoned, Joseph's life was filled with trials. Yet, through each hardship, God was preparing him for a greater purpose. By the time Joseph became a ruler in Egypt, he had the wisdom, resilience, and faith needed to save an entire nation. His trials weren't setbacks. They were stepping stones. It's important to remember that God doesn't leave us alone in the fire. Just as the craftsman watches over the gold, ensuring it isn't damaged, God is with us in every trial. He knows how much we can handle and promises not to let us face more than we can bear. That doesn't mean the fire won't feel hot, but it does mean we're never abandoned. Sometimes, the hardest part of a trial is the waiting, wondering when it will end or what purpose it serves. But trust this, the fire is temporary and the result is worth it. Job understood this when he said he would come forth as gold. He didn't minimize the pain he endured, but he held on to the hope that God was refining him for something greater. Think of a sculptor chiseling away at a block of marble. Every strike of the hammer seems harsh, but with each blow, the masterpiece hidden within begins to emerge. That's what God is doing in your life through trials. Every challenge, every setback, every moment of pain is shaping you into the person He created you to be. So, the next time you face a trial, remember this: it's not the end of your story. It's part of the process that will bring out the best in you. Trust that God is with you in the fire, and when it's over, you'll shine brighter than ever before. Picture a clock, its hands moving steadily, second by second, minute by minute. No matter how much you wish time would speed up or slow down, it doesn't. The clock moves according to its design, never early, never late. This is how God's timing works, perfectly orchestrated, even when it feels frustrating to us. Ecclesiastes 3:1 tells us, "There is a time for everything, and a season for every activity under the heavens." This verse isn't just a poetic statement. It's a profound reminder that every moment in life has a purpose and happens exactly when it's meant to. Waiting, however, is hard. When you're longing for an answer, a breakthrough, or a resolution, time seems to drag. But think about planting a garden. You prepare the soil, plant the seeds, and water them faithfully. Yet, no matter how eager you are to see results, you can't force the plants to grow faster. They sprout, bloom, and bear fruit only in their season. Similarly, God works in our lives according to His divine schedule, not ours. One of the challenges of waiting is the temptation to take matters into our own hands. We see this in the story of Abraham and Sarah. God promised them a child, but as the years passed, their patience wore thin. Sarah encouraged Abraham to have a child with her servant Hagar, which led to heartache and conflict. Eventually, God fulfilled His promise in His time, blessing them with Isaac. Their story teaches us that stepping outside of God's timing often leads to unnecessary struggles. It's important to recognize that God's timing isn't about delays or denials. It's about preparation. While you're waiting, He's working. He's aligning circumstances, shaping your character, and paving the way for His perfect will to unfold. It's like watching an artist paint a masterpiece. At first, the strokes might seem random or incomplete, but with time, the full picture emerges, revealing its beauty. Think of the Israelites wandering in the wilderness. What could have been an 11-day journey to the Promised Land took 40 years. Why? Because they needed to grow, to learn, and to trust God completely before stepping into their destiny. Their waiting wasn't wasted. It was necessary for their transformation. The same is true for us. What feels like a delay is often God's way of preparing us for something greater. During seasons of waiting, it's easy to feel forgotten or overlooked. But remember, God's silence isn't His absence. Like a teacher during a test, He's still there, watching, guiding, and cheering you on. He hasn't abandoned you. He's simply letting the process unfold. Trusting His timing means believing that He knows exactly when to act and that His plans for you are good. As you wait, focus on what you can do in the present. Use the time to grow, to learn, and to deepen your relationship with God. Waiting isn't passive. It's an active process of faith and surrender. It's about choosing to believe that God's timing is always better than our own, even when we don't understand it. So, the next time you find yourself in a season of waiting, take a deep breath and remember, God's clock never skips a beat. His timing is perfect, and when the moment is right, everything will fall into place exactly as He intended. Imagine standing on the ground, looking up at a towering mountain. From where you are, you can only see the base, the trees, and maybe a glimpse of the sky above. Now picture someone standing at the summit. Their view is completely different. They see the valleys, the rivers, and the horizon stretching endlessly. That's the difference between our perspective and God's. Isaiah 55:8-9 reminds us, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." This truth is humbling. We like to think we have everything figured out, that our plans and decisions are well informed, but our understanding is limited, like seeing only a single piece of a puzzle. God, on the other hand, sees the entire picture. His ways are higher, not just in wisdom, but in purpose and love. When we grasp this, it becomes easier to trust Him, even when life doesn't make sense. Sometimes God's ways feel confusing. Think about the story of Joseph, sold into slavery by his brothers, falsely accused and imprisoned. Joseph's life seemed to spiral out of control. Yet God used those very circumstances to position him as a ruler in Egypt, saving countless lives during a famine. What looked like setbacks were actually steps forward in God's higher plan. Our limited perspective often leads us to question God's actions or inactions. We wonder why a prayer goes unanswered or why a door closes when we desperately wanted it to open. But what if that unanswered prayer is protecting us from something we can't see? What if that closed door is redirecting us to a better path? God's ways may not align with our expectations, but they always align with His perfect will. Think of a parent teaching their child to walk. The child might stumble, cry, or get frustrated, not understanding why the parent doesn't simply carry them everywhere. But the parent knows that walking is essential for the child's growth. Similarly, God allows us to face challenges because He knows they're necessary for our spiritual maturity. This doesn't mean we'll always understand what God is doing. In fact, there will be times when His ways feel completely incomprehensible, but that's where faith comes in. Trusting in God's higher ways means surrendering the need for explanations and choosing to believe in His goodness, even in the midst of uncertainty. When life feels overwhelming, remind yourself of this truth. God's perspective is eternal. He isn't bound by time or circumstances. While we see only the present, He sees the past, present, and future simultaneously. This infinite perspective allows Him to orchestrate every detail of our lives with precision and care. So the next time you're faced with a situation that doesn't make sense, remember the mountain analogy. While you're standing at the base, God is at the summit. He sees what you can't, and his ways are always higher, always wiser, and always rooted in love. Imagine standing in front of an endless library, its shelves stretching beyond what your eyes can see. Each book contains knowledge, secrets, and wisdom beyond your understanding. No matter how many volumes you read, there will always be more to discover. This is a glimpse of God's infinite wisdom. Romans 11:33 expresses it beautifully. Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God! How unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond tracing out. These words remind us of one profound truth. God's wisdom is far beyond human comprehension. As humans, we often crave answers. We want to understand why things happen, why certain prayers go unanswered, or why life unfolds in unexpected ways. It's in our nature to seek explanations, but God's wisdom doesn't operate within the limits of human logic. His knowledge is vast, covering not just what we see, but what we cannot begin to grasp. While we look at life through a keyhole, God has the entire panoramic view. This can be challenging to accept, especially in moments of confusion or pain. Consider the story of Job. He was a man who loved God and lived righteously, yet he endured unimaginable suffering. Job questioned God, seeking reasons for his trials. But when God finally responded, he didn't offer explanations. Instead, he pointed to his creation, his power, and his infinite wisdom, reminding Job that some things are simply beyond human understanding. God's wisdom isn't just about knowing what's best for us. It's about knowing what's best for the entire picture. Every decision he makes, every path he guides us down, is part of a larger plan. Think of a chessboard. While we focus on a single move, God sees the entire game. He anticipates every possibility and orchestrates every detail to align with his perfect will. This truth can feel overwhelming, but also liberating. It means we don't have to have all the answers. We don't need to carry the burden of understanding everything. Instead, we're invited to trust the one who does. His wisdom assures us that even when life doesn't make sense, it's not random or meaningless. It's part of his divine design. Let me share a story. Rebecca was devastated when her dream of opening a bakery fell apart due to unforeseen circumstances. For months, she wrestled with doubt, questioning why God had allowed her plans to fail. But during that time, she found herself volunteering at a local community center, teaching cooking classes to underprivileged children. What started as a small act of service grew into a passion. Years later, Rebecca realized that while she had dreamed of serving customers, God's plan was for her to serve others in a deeper, more meaningful way. When we acknowledge the depth of God's wisdom, it shifts our perspective. We stop striving to control every outcome and start embracing his guidance, even when we don't understand it. This doesn't mean we stop asking questions. It means we trust him with the answers we may never receive. It's about finding peace in his sovereignty and resting in the assurance that his ways are always good. So, as you navigate life's uncertainties, hold on to this truth. God's wisdom is incomprehensible, but his love for you is undeniable. You may not understand his ways, but you can trust his heart. And that trust is what anchors us in the midst of life's greatest mysteries. Think about the most exhausting day you've ever had. Maybe it was filled with endless tasks, difficult conversations, or moments of emotional strain. At the end of it, you likely collapsed into bed, completely drained. Now imagine someone who never feels that kind of exhaustion. Isaiah 40:28 tells us, "The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom." Indeed, this verse reminds us that while we have limits, God does not. He is tireless, eternal, and always present. This truth is especially comforting when we feel weak or overwhelmed. In those moments when life feels like too much, when you're running on empty and don't know how to keep going, God is your source of strength. He doesn't just understand your weariness, he offers you his limitless energy and power. It's like plugging a dying phone into an infinite power source. It restores what was depleted. Think of Elijah in the Bible. After facing the prophets of Baal and witnessing God's power, Elijah found himself emotionally and physically drained. He fled to the wilderness, feeling defeated and alone. But God met him there, not with condemnation but with care. He provided food, rest, and gentle encouragement, reminding Elijah that he wasn't alone. In the same way, God meets us in our exhaustion, offering us what we need to keep moving forward. God's strength is not just physical, it's emotional and spiritual as well. He understands the weight of our burdens and invites us to cast them on him. Matthew 11:28 says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." This isn't just an offer of relief, it's a promise of renewal. When we bring our struggles to God, he replaces our weakness with his strength. Imagine a marathon runner nearing the finish line, their legs trembling, their breath shallow. Just when they think they can't take another step, someone appears beside them, offering support, encouragement, and the strength to continue. That's what God does for us. He doesn't remove the race, but gives us the endurance to finish it. It's also important to remember that God's tirelessness isn't just for our benefit, it's a reflection of his nature. As the creator of the universe, he sustains everything, every star, every ocean, every heartbeat. And yet, he's never too busy or too drained to care for you personally. His energy is boundless, and his attention is infinite. Let me share another story. Mark was a single father working multiple jobs to provide for his children. He often felt overwhelmed, wondering how he could possibly keep going. One evening, after a particularly difficult day, he sat in his car and prayed, "God, I don't have the strength for this." In that quiet moment, he felt a peace he couldn't explain. It wasn't that his problems disappeared, but he found the energy to face them, one step at a time. Mark experienced firsthand the renewal that only God can provide. So, when you feel like you've reached your limit, remember this: God never grows weary. His strength is always available, his power is limitless, and his love for you never fades. Lean on him, and you'll discover that even in your weakest moments, he is more than enough. Picture a scale, perfectly balanced, with justice on one side and kindness on the other. In human hands, it's difficult to maintain that balance. We often lean too far toward one, neglecting the other. But in God, justice and kindness coexist flawlessly. Psalm 145:17 declares, "The Lord is righteous in all his ways and faithful in all he does." This verse reveals a profound truth. God's justice is not cold or detached, and his kindness is not weak or compromising. Both attributes work together seamlessly in his character. Justice is one of God's defining traits. He cannot tolerate wrongdoing, nor does he let sin go unaddressed. This might feel intimidating, but it's also deeply reassuring. It means that no evil escapes his notice, and no act of injustice goes unanswered. In a world where injustice often seems to prevail, God's perfect justice is a promise that everything will ultimately be made right. His timing might not align with ours, but his actions are always precise and fair. At the same time, God's kindness shines through every decision he makes. His justice is never harsh or vindictive, but is always paired with compassion. Think of the story of the woman caught in adultery. The Pharisees wanted her punished, but Jesus responded with both justice and kindness. He acknowledged the sin, but offered her grace, saying, "Go now and leave your life of sin." John 8:11. This moment illustrates how God balances accountability with mercy. Consider how God interacts with us. When we make mistakes, he doesn't turn away or punish us out of anger. Instead, he corrects us gently, guiding us back to his path. His discipline is an act of love, not condemnation. Just as a parent disciplines their child for their own good, God's justice is always rooted in his desire to see us grow and flourish. This balance of justice and kindness extends beyond individuals to the world as a whole. We often see corruption, unfairness, and suffering, and it's easy to wonder where God is in the midst of it all. But his justice ensures that every wrong will be righted, and his kindness ensures that his responses are filled with wisdom and compassion. Even when we don't understand his methods, we can trust his character. Let me share an example. Lily, a teacher, faced an unjust situation at her workplace where her efforts were overlooked and she was unfairly criticized. She prayed for resolution, but nothing changed immediately. Over time, however, her integrity and kindness won the respect of her students and colleagues. Eventually, her perseverance led to recognition and a promotion. She realized that God's justice operates in ways we might not immediately see, but always produces the best outcomes. God's justice and kindness are also evident in his ultimate plan for humanity. Through Jesus, he satisfied the demands of justice while extending unparalleled kindness. On the cross, the weight of sin was judged, but the offer of salvation was extended to everyone. This act is the ultimate example of how justice and kindness work hand in hand. So, as you navigate the complexities of life, remember this: God's justice is perfect and his kindness is unfailing. When you face injustice or struggle with your own shortcomings, trust that he is working for your good with both firmness and love. In him, you'll always find the balance you seek. Imagine being handpicked for a special mission, chosen not randomly, but with intentionality and love. That's what it means to be chosen by God. Ephesians 1:11 reminds us, "In him we were also chosen, having been predestined according to the plan of him who works out everything in conformity with the purpose of his will." This verse isn't just about being selected. It's about being part of a divine plan that is carefully designed and uniquely tailored to each one of us. Being chosen by God isn't based on merit or achievements. It's a reflection of his love and sovereignty. He sees your potential even when you don't. Think about a potter working with clay. The clay doesn't have to prove its worth. It simply has to be moldable. Similarly, God chooses us not because we're perfect, but because he knows what he can create through us. This sense of purpose is deeply empowering. It means your life has meaning, even in the smallest details. Sometimes we question our worth or wonder if our contributions matter, but when you remember that God has chosen you, it transforms how you see yourself and your role in the world. You're not here by accident. You're here with a purpose. Take the story of Esther in the Bible. She was an ordinary girl who became a queen and found herself in a position to save her people. Her uncle reminded her, "And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this?" Esther 4:14. Esther's journey shows us that being chosen often comes with responsibilities, but it also comes with the assurance that God equips us for the tasks he assigns. Being chosen doesn't mean life will always be easy. In fact, it often means facing challenges and stepping out of your comfort zone. But it also means you're never alone. God walks with you, guiding your steps and providing the strength you need to fulfill your purpose. It's like being on a team with the best coach. He knows your weaknesses, but he also knows exactly how to help you succeed. Let me share a story. Alex always felt invisible, like his life didn't have much impact. But one day, while volunteering at a shelter, he struck up a conversation with someone who was struggling. That simple act of kindness sparked a chain reaction, leading Alex to start a mentorship program that changed countless lives. Looking back, he realized that God had chosen him for that moment, even when he didn't feel qualified or prepared. When you embrace the fact that you're chosen, it changes how you approach life. You start to see opportunities as divine appointments rather than coincidences. You recognize that even your struggles have a purpose, shaping you into someone who can fulfill the mission God has for you. So as you go about your daily life, remember this: you are chosen by God, not by chance, but by design. Trust that he has a plan for you, and walk boldly in the confidence that your life is part of something far greater than you can imagine. Imagine standing in front of a locked door. You've knocked, you've waited, and still it hasn't opened. The temptation to walk away grows stronger with every passing moment. But what if you knew without a doubt that behind that door was something extraordinary, and it would open at the perfect time? That's what waiting on God feels like. It's not passive, it's active faith, choosing to trust that what God has prepared is worth the wait. Waiting can feel like the hardest part of faith. In a world where instant gratification is the norm, patience becomes a challenge. But God's timing, as we've seen, is flawless. He's not slow. He's deliberate. Each moment of waiting serves a purpose, whether it's to prepare you, align circumstances, or refine your heart. Isaiah 40:31 says, "But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint." Waiting on God is about trusting that renewal will come. Consider the story of Hannah. She longed for a child and prayed fervently year after year, enduring the pain of unanswered prayers. But Hannah didn't lose hope. She trusted God's plan, and in his perfect timing, she gave birth to Samuel, one of Israel's greatest prophets. Her waiting wasn't wasted. It was woven into a divine plan far greater than she could have imagined. While waiting, the enemy often tries to sow seeds of doubt. Thoughts like, "God has forgotten you," or "You're wasting your time," creep in. But these are lies meant to weaken your faith. Remember, God's silence is not his absence. Like a gardener tending to hidden roots, he's working beneath the surface, nurturing what will eventually bloom. Waiting also reveals what's in our hearts. Do we trust God, or are we relying on our own strength? Do we focus on his promises, or are we distracted by our circumstances? It's in these moments that faith is refined. Think of waiting as a spiritual workout, strengthening your trust and dependence on him. It's not easy, but it's transformative. Let me share a story. Sarah dreamed of opening a small bakery. She saved, planned, and prayed, but obstacles kept delaying her progress. Frustrated, she considered giving up. But during her waiting period, she honed her baking skills, connected with mentors, and deepened her relationship with God. When the bakery finally opened, it was more successful than she had imagined. Looking back, Sarah realized that the delay was God's way of preparing her for something greater. One of the hardest parts of waiting is not knowing how long it will last. But here's the truth: God is never late. He's always on time. Your job is to trust him and remain faithful in the process. Waiting with confidence means keeping your eyes on him, not the clock. It's about believing that the wait is part of the blessing. So, as you face seasons of waiting, remember that God is working behind the scenes. Trust that his timing is perfect, and that what he has planned for you will exceed anything you could imagine. Hold on to hope, knowing that those who wait on the Lord will never be disappointed. Imagine standing on a solid rock while waves crash around you. The storm rages, but you remain unshaken because your foundation is unmovable. This is what it feels like to rest in God's sovereignty. In a world full of uncertainties, his control over every detail of creation gives us peace and assurance. Psalm 103:19 declares, "The Lord has established his throne in heaven, and his kingdom rules over all." This verse reminds us that no matter what happens, God reigns supreme. God's sovereignty means that nothing happens by chance. Every moment, every decision, every event is under his authority. This doesn't mean life will always be easy, but it does mean that nothing is outside of his control. Even when things seem chaotic, God is orchestrating everything for his glory and our good. It's like a conductor leading an orchestra. What might sound like noise to us becomes a beautiful symphony in his hands. Consider the story of Daniel in the lion's den. By all human logic, Daniel's fate was sealed when he was thrown into that pit. But God's sovereignty was at work. He shut the mouths of the lions, protecting Daniel and displaying his power to an entire kingdom. Daniel's story shows us that God's control extends even into the most dangerous and hopeless situations. This truth is a source of great comfort, especially when life feels out of control. Whether it's a global crisis, a personal struggle, or an unexpected loss, we can trust that God is not surprised or overwhelmed. He sees the beginning and the end and knows exactly how each piece fits into his plan. This doesn't mean we won't face storms, but it does mean we can anchor ourselves in the certainty that he is in charge. Sometimes God's sovereignty can be difficult to understand, especially when we face pain or injustice. We wonder why he allows certain things to happen, but trusting his sovereignty means believing that his ways are higher than ours, even when we don't have all the answers. It's about finding peace in knowing that his plans are always for our ultimate good, even if they don't make sense in the moment. Let me tell you about Michael. He lost his job unexpectedly and felt like his life was falling apart. But instead of giving in to despair, he chose to trust God's plan. Months later, Michael found a new job that not only matched his skills, but also aligned with his passion for helping others. He realized that losing his previous job was part of God's way of leading him to something better. God's sovereignty also reminds us that we are never alone. He is actively involved in every detail of our lives, guiding us through challenges and celebrating our victories. It's like walking with a shepherd who knows every twist and turn of the path. No matter how lost or uncertain we feel, he is there to lead us back to safety. So, as you face life's uncertainties, anchor yourself in this truth. God is in control. His sovereignty is your security. His love is your foundation, and his plans for you are unshakable. Trust him, and you'll find peace that surpasses all understanding. As you reach the end of this video, take a moment to reflect. Every step you've walked, every challenge you've faced, and every moment you've waited, it's all part of God's perfect plan. Life doesn't always make sense to us in the moment, but what we've learned today is that God's timing is never late. His ways are always higher, and his plans are far greater than anything we can imagine. Maybe you're facing uncertainty right now. Perhaps you feel like you're standing at a crossroads, unsure of where to go. Here's the good news. God already sees the end of your story, and he's guiding you every step of the way. The key is to trust him, to let go of control and embrace the journey, knowing that he's working everything for your good. Now let me ask you, what spoke to your heart today? Was it the reminder that God's strength is endless, even when we feel weak? Or perhaps it was the realization that waiting isn't wasted, it's preparation for something extraordinary. Whatever it is, hold on to it. Let it be a seed planted in your soul, growing your faith and drawing you closer to the one who holds your life in his hands. And here's something even more exciting. The journey doesn't stop here. This is just the beginning. There's so much more to discover about God's plans, his love and his faithfulness. Stay curious, keep seeking, and never stop trusting that he's leading you to something incredible. If this message touched you today, I'd love to hear about it. Share in the comments below. What did you learn, and how has this inspired you to trust God's plan for your life? Let's grow together as a community of faith, encouraging one another on this journey. And don't forget, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs a reminder of God's perfect plan. Together, we can spread this message of hope and trust to the world. Thank you for being here today. Remember, God's not done with you yet. His best is still to come. See you in the next video.